Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Fully Booked Chats. Today, joining us live is author Lauren Ho, writer of the best-selling book Last Tang Standing. In June this year, she released her second book, Lucy Yi is Not a Romantic, which I really loved. And we're going to be talking about this book today. Yes, matching copies. Okay. Lauren is a reformed legal counsel who now prefers to write for pleasure. Hailing from Malaysia, she is currently based in Singapore, where she's ostensibly working on her next novel while attempting to parent. My name is Ariel, a resident bookworm from the Fully Book team. Before we begin, we would like to remind everyone that this is a safe space, so please keep comments respectful and non-discriminatory. Later on, we will have a Q&A with Lauren, so please comment your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Without further ado, let us all welcome the wonderful Lauren Ho. So, hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi everyone. I am very good. I have been eating a lot of cheese for the past 3 weeks. So yeah, life is good.
Nice. So, cheese. Where are you calling us from?
So I'm currently on holiday in France with my
Oh,
mother-in-law
nice.
and her family. So
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
I mean that's basically what I've been doing and writing, of course, because when I'm on holiday, I'm writing. So never really
Oh, wow.
fully
The work doesn't stop.
relaxing. Nope, the work doesn't stop. Yeah.
Oh, man. It's so, oh my God. I love France. Where in France are you calling us from?
So I'm actually in a city called Metz, ETZ.
Okay.
It's
It's,
not a
ah,
very large one. Yeah, and it's a it's a historically important city that's closer to the borders of Luxembourg. And I know
oh,
it's not
okay. Yeah.
really well known, but it's nice. Not everything in
Yeah.
Paris is not everything in France is about Paris. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a huge country, so it's good to
exactly.
hear that you're having eating a lot of cheese during your holiday.
Mm.
Let's go ahead and jump in and let's talk about your latest book, Lucy is Not a Romantic. Congratulations again for. Did you write this during the pandemic? And this was published kind of during the tail end. So, congrats on completing that feat. I don't think it seems like a difficult thing for authors to promote during the pandemic. Yeah, so congrats again. My first question about the book is what was the kind of general inspiration around it? And was Lucy based on a real person, or was she based on any of your uh, people in your life? Because she's an incredibly compelling character.
Oh, thank you very much. With Lucy Yi, I actually drew inspiration for writing a story about elective co-parenting, which is a relatively new trend.
Right.
Because I have some friends who are in a queer relationship and they were looking to have children.
Mm,
And so basically,
right.
one of the options they were discovering, researching was actually elective co-parenting. And so I did, of course, some research on this. And I
Hmm.
thought this seems like a really common sense way to go about it. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
because I like
Yeah.
numbers, I like
It's
numbers, I
straightforward.
like
Yeah.
science, and it just felt like if someone's going to go on the site to find someone who's compatible and they're supposed to reveal a lot about themselves up front, that seems to be the right basis for not just co-parenting but for any relationship.
Right.
And so I really wanted to examine that concept in the context of a so-called rom-com, because my book has been classified as a rom-com, so in contemporary romance.
Right.
I think it's very interesting because in like contemporary romance novels, we're always supposed to, or maybe even in real life, in romantic relationships, we're always supposed to preserve the mystique, right? We don't talk about
Hmm.
difficult subjects. We don't broach heavy stuff until like we trap the person. And then it's like,
Yeah.
hello, here's all my baggage. Here's all my worrying stuff that you should know about. And sometimes that doesn't even happen until after the persons are married or in a serious committed relationship with kids, and then they find out that like they're totally incompatible on certain points, and these are real deal breakers.
Right.
So talking about elective co-parenting for me was just like it just seemed to make sense on one level, of course not on all levels,
Right.
for people who are looking to start something with another person, not necessarily needing to be in a romantic relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And that it's fascinating that you bring up not only elective co-parenting. So I'm kind of going to jump to a different question.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, I suppose, new, and for a lot of people, that's a very non-traditional way to approach starting a family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this kind of trope, right? We're talking about rom-com tropes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of co-parents to friends to lovers trope is unique, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
So why exactly uh, did you want this to be the anchor of your book? And something that I found interesting was you said my book is classified as a rom-com. Would you not classify your book as a rom-com?
I think my DNA is a writer, Ariel, because I used to be a stand-up comic for 2 years, an amateur, of course, in
Oh,
Singapore.
cool. Yeah.
I think for me, my DNA as a writer is like I always use humor to
Right.
sort of like approach subjects, and I think in general my books, if I may say so myself, are
Yeah.
pretty funny, and
Yes, they are.
so so thank you. So with that, I think it's a great way to sort of like use humor to sort of examine more heavy subject matters, and
Right.
for that reason, and because in publishing, romance is the best-selling genre. Because my book kind of straddles like general adult contemporary slash women's fiction slash romantic comedy. Um, it kind of sits across several genres. So my
Right.
publishers and I guess some reviewers just straight up say it's a rom com because it's funny and it has a romantic kind of like plot. But if
Right.
you look at Last Tang Standing and if you look at Lucy Yi, I think actually the central story is more about a woman trying to
Yes.
find her way to happiness. And on
Yes.
the way there is some romantic entanglements, but it's
Right.
not like the central thrust of the narrative, if you wish. It's more like something that is a vehicle. The romance is a vehicle to examine other issues, which are, to me, as the writer, my intention is that those are the issues that I am actually more concerned with. But of course, I
Right.
love romance. I mean, it's so hard to write good romance, and I personally feel like we need to move past this whole thing about like feeling maybe embarrassed about reading it, especially like I
Yeah.
get DMs from guys telling me, oh my gosh, I read your book, I don't know what to do with myself now, I really liked it, what does that mean, and I'm like, guys, it's okay to like a romance, it's okay to like women's fiction, because if you think
Right.
about it, like there's no corresponding genre, there's no like lads fiction or guys fiction or men's fiction, right? It's just categorized as like general fiction. And if you think
Right.
about what is traditionally considered to be like manly subjects, like spy
Right.
thrillers, thrillers, murder, gore, whatever,
Yeah.
that they just presume that if this it's a genre like a thriller, everyone's going to read it regardless of their gender, right? But
Right.
when you classify something as women's fiction, there is a kind of presumption that the people who would be interested in it are women, and that's just kind of sad because you're limiting a huge range of fiction that's so good, that examines deep,
Right.
wonderful subjects,
Right.
and you're saying that it's only for women, and I find that kind of sad.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think so you mentioned an anecdote about how guys are messaging you and being like, "Oh no, I liked your books." Like almost like, "What do I do with myself? I like a girl book, you know," and you shouldn't be
Yeah,
ashamed of that. And I think there are also
yeah.
women, myself included, who had to get over the shame of like loving rom-coms. Like
But
it's,
why?
you know, exactly, you know,
It's like the
it's like,
BTS.
yeah, sorry. Yep, yeah, it's like BTS. I didn't catch that last portion, but yeah, it's like BTS. Like, why be ashamed? Just love what you love.
Yeah, you might like classical music and you might like BTS, you know? I'm
Yeah.
also I like BTS, by the way. But anyway, let's not get into
So,
that.
so people watching in the audience, there are a lot of BTS fans who are also readers of Fully Booked. But yeah, thank you. Yes, it's a great thing that you brought up, and now that we're talking a little bit about how the audience or your audience is kind of reaching out to you to talk about your books, to give you feedback, at some point, were you ever a little bit nervous about the feedback for Lucy Yi? Because it is
Mm.
extremely unconventional. And when
Mm-hmm.
I think about someone like Lucy's parents, who are,
Mm-hmm.
um, these are people I know and types of parents that I know in my own life,
Mm-hmm.
they'll listen to the concept of elective co-parenting and be like, "What? You're having a child with a friend?"
Without
So were
getting
you ever?
married,
Yeah, not getting married. What do you think? What is that? So
get
is
out
that
right now.
something you ever? Yeah, exactly. Is that something you ever were worried about as a writer, as how people would respond, and you yourself are a Southeast Asian woman, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's a great question because there's so many layers to it.
yeah,
When I write as an author, it's very difficult to say I never care about feedback because we live in an age where
right,
feedback is instant, it's in your face. Some people
right,
have just no shame about tagging you in horrible stuff and telling you to your face what they think about
yeah,
you, which would never have happened if we were in a face-to-face interaction, right? There's
that's
something
true,
called
that's true,
social norms that you have to sort of, basic social etiquette that you
exactly,
have to adhere to. But we're in this
exactly,
age where feedback is instant, it's online, it's from every single sector of the internet. And let's face it, if you want to write a good book, or if you want to write a book that like causes people to think about things and question the things, the assumptions that they have, that book is going to piss someone off. And that was something
right,
I kind of knew at the back of my mind with Last Tang Standing, and I knew
yeah,
that it was a book that had like it's very Southeast Asian. I'm not trying to cut back the things that happen that are said because they're authentic. Like parents of a certain generation from our part of the world might be fat phobic, that fat shaming as well.
yes,
These are
yes,
authentic things, and I've literally I mean I've gotten people telling me like, oh, that's just like the author has like problematic opinions, and I'm like,
oh,
yeah, but these are not my opinions. These are the
mm,
opinions of a character in the book, and is there to serve a purpose. Is there to sort of like provide cultural um, sort of like
right,
hue, if you wish. It's there to
right,
provide a setting and to orient yourself in what is not your culture. And I find that
right,
the loudest readers tend to be readers who are not familiar with this culture and are there to tell you exactly what's wrong with your book because it says
yeah,
all these things. And it's especially prevalent in genre writing like romance novels, and the readers don't necessarily want to be confronted with what they term to be problematic things and difficult things.
yeah,
Not necessarily, I'm not saying this is across the board, but it is true for
yeah,
romance readers that this is the case because I get feedback like that all the time. And,
mm,
it's the same for like Helen Hong when she came out with her wonderful book, The Heart Principle. And it had so
mm,
many difficult themes. And like one of the reviewers was saying, like, is this even romance if you're approaching such difficult subjects? So for me, like, I write the books I want to write. I can't control how they're being classified when it comes to marketing because I have no control of that. The publishers will market it in the genre that they think sells the book the best. But
right,
for me, I think if you really want to slap a genre on your book, I think the exists for film and series, but it doesn't exist necessarily for books. And I find that a shame because it's hard to say that my books are really rom-com. I mean, they're funny and they have romantic subplots, but
yeah.
it's hard to say that they're really, really rom-com. I think dramedy is a more appropriate classification.
Yes, actually, that is, I think, one of the things that I found very surprising about Lucy Yi. I was like, "Whoa, this is hardcore." Well, not hardcore in a really heavy sense, but I felt these issues
Mm-hmm.
were so real. And as I think, I too am a Southeast Asian daughter of Southeast Asian parents who is living in Southeast Asia and is therefore,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know. Um, I understand these cultural conventions that the characters
Mm-hmm.
in the book, dramedy is so, yeah, I think that is very appropriate. Now that we're talking about the characters in your book, I want to talk about Lucy's Lucy, I think, is a very strong-willed, kind of feminist. I am not afraid of how people perceive me. I will go after what I want character, and she is becoming more common in women's fiction and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is also, or the people I also find interesting, are her, I guess, love interests. So, how did you create
Mm-hmm.
or how did you sketch out Mark and Colin, who are kind of foils of each other? What did you consider
Mm-hmm.
when creating these two, I guess, very familiar characters? They're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like one is extremely terrible and the other is just fine. You know.
Ah, I'm so
Um,
glad you
yeah.
said that. Yeah, because
Yeah. No.
sometimes when I
Yeah.
read certain comments, I mean, messages that are directed to me as an author, they're like, "Oh, I can't believe this character is so gaslighty," and I'm like, "Yeah, he is gaslighty, but that's not his whole persona." Like, oh, it's, oh, this
Yeah.
character is so problematic. Like, why would anyone choose that guy? But if you think about
Right.
it, like the character of Mark, without going into any spoilers, he's a good guy too. He has good things going for him. He's very caring, a little bit patriarchal in a way, but that's very common for a lot of men from this part of the world. I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
like the case for everyone. And again, I need to like put all these provisos there, but all these caveats there. But I'm just saying this is an attitude that I see very commonly, even in men who are millennials. Like, I guess I don't know if you're a millennial or attitudes that even the younger generation of men who grew up here, and it's not necessarily problematic.
Sorry,
It's
Lauren, you're
just
cutting
a
out.
very different way of approaching pulling board.
Hello. Hello. Sorry,
Um,
Lauren. Sorry, you're cutting off. Can you hear me? Okay, I think Lauren might be experiencing some. Oh, there, you're back.
Oh, there I'm
Okay,
back. Sorry,
sorry.
I had to hotspot myself. So as I was saying, I think
Yeah, okay.
like I would just say that without giving away any spoilers that when I write male characters or love interests, I mean, because one day I might not write like hetero relationships necessarily. When I write love
Okay.
interests, I tend to make sure that they're fully fleshed out and they're neither like black and white. You know what I mean? Black or white. I think they're more like people that are real, like real people with all their baggage, all their like negative aspects of their
Yeah,
personality and the good things about them, because that's human, because we're not all perfect. And anyone who tells you that they're perfect, who tells you that like they're going to do the right thing every point of time, is kidding themselves or not fully aware of their own inadequacies or insecurities or baggage. So I
yeah,
think like it's very much in my writer DNA to approach people like the multi-layered subjects that they are, and to put on page the good, the bad, and let you decide where you stand with these characters. Because I don't tell you who's good, who's bad, who's the villain. I don't believe in that. I
right.
believe even really bad people normally have redeeming factors somewhere. They might like,
Yeah,
they might love cats or animals, like, and they are very kind to animals, or they're really
right,
kind to their own family members. I don't know. It's hard to say. I just think
right,
that everyone has good and bad in them.
right. And I think I mean, I love that you mentioned that because I think it's not great when the author is already putting their characters in these kinds of moral boxes, like, oh, this person
Mm-hmm.
is the clear choice, let's say, or like all good, all bad. Because as you mentioned, I think Mark is an extremely compelling character because I know so many people like Mark, which is not to say that they're bad. These are just
Mm-hmm.
they're trying is all I can is the best way to
Yeah,
describe it.
say, yeah,
They're
exactly. They're
trying, right?
trying. They're
They're
trying.
trying,
They're really trying. And they're doing what they think is best for the people that they care for. And of
right?
course, objectively, there are problematic issues with how they express their love. But
Yeah,
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 and honestly, um, I think a really good book that really examines it and puts it very clearly on page is Colin Hoover's "It Ends with Us."
oh yeah,
I just really like how she managed to portray that like the love interest was clearly problematic, like so many things that were wrong, but also that in on whole their
yeah,
relationship had good things going for them at certain times.
yeah,
So I just want everyone to like understand that of course there are serious behaviors that are like really bad, but I'm
yeah,
just saying that at least for the books that I'm writing right now, the subject matters that I'm talking about,
yeah.
there's no like villain or good person straight off the bat.
Right. And I think as a reader, it's even more compelling. I love a kind of morally you don't know where to place the character.
Mm-hmm.
It's very compelling. Okay, so
And
now that
culturally
we're
dependent as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to
oh
interrupt.
that's
Like,
true.
but
No, 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 that's fine.
yes,
That's
a
true.
reader from a very like individualistic culture would say immediately like, "Oh, that guy, poof, sucking up to his
Yes.
parents or like too much about the parents." And we're
Yes.
in this culture, we would say that's good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So every
Yes,
time
totally.
exactly. So every time, and I'm writing books that are set in Asia from a Southeast Asian lens. It's not
Yeah.
like an Asian American or someone else who's from a different culture entirely coming in and seeing Asia. It's really from a
Yes.
Southeast Asian lens. And again, I don't claim to represent every person in Southeast Asia because I can't. There's so many like
Right.
nuance. There's so much nuance, right, from one country to the other.
Right.
But I do think that in general, we can agree that a lot of Southeast Asian countries have more less of an individualistic culture. It's
Yeah.
more yeah. So I think like we have to take into account the cultural context as well when we read a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that's why. So, for anyone who is watching, please pick up a copy of Lucy Yi. It was so refreshing because it wasn't Asian American. It was very, I think, I mean, there are parts of the book that is set in the US, and there are
Mm-hmm.
characters who are Americanized, and that causes
Mm-hmm.
some tension with the
Mm-hmm.
Asian characters. But I I felt like I could really relate to the core themes of the story. And now that we're talking a little bit about the kind of thematic layout of Lucy is not a romantic, there are, and we've been talking about quite serious issues, but in the book you touch on things like parenthood, pregnancy loss, grief.
Mm-hmm.
How was the, I guess, the creative process for writing this
Mm-hmm.
novel? Maybe was it different from Last Tang Standing? Was it similar? How was the experience for you writing it?
Okay, I think when I think procedurally I'm much more organized this time because I'm
Okay.
actually a short story writer. I mean, I started out being a short
Oh,
story
cool.
writer. I have
Yeah.
short stories that are published and or have won competitions. So I'm actually
Nice.
more of a short story writer. And when I
Okay.
started writing Last Tang Standing, I was just like doing like scenes without any kind of like chronological order, just putting them on page. It's like, oh, I feel this. I'm going to write about this. So for Lucy, I was much more methodical with it. I had like
Right.
a plot, a plot that I had sort of deviated from as well, but I had somewhat mapped it out, because I
Yeah.
felt like it would be a better way to go about it. But of course,
Right.
when you're a writer and if you really are invested with your characters and if your characters are really well fleshed out, they will sometimes run off with the story and go in a direction that you're not expecting. So that happened with one of the characters, and I think like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't really have I don't recommend that people approach writing because I believe some of you might be interested in writing a novel or being a writer, and like my advice is just to sort of like start with the character and have a rough idea of the journey that they want to take, but
Okay.
give them space to breathe and sort of make their own decisions, and the story will be stronger for it. Yeah.
Right. Okay, interesting. And you talk about the kind of deviations that you took, and earlier you mentioned that you were a stand-up comic, which is so cool. I'd love to watch you one day. Uh,
No,
no,
no
well,
one
too
should watch me on stage. I
too
mean, I was
bad.
not a great stand-up comic because, like, stand-up comedy is a totally different art form. There is a
Okay,
written aspect of it, of course, and that was the
right,
part that I enjoyed. But the
right.
performance aspect of it, I was just not that great. I'll be right honest with you. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just, and literally the reason why I got into stand-up comedy because I wanted to challenge my fear of public speaking. So I was like,
Oh,
what better way? Jump straight into the deep end. I love the scene. I love the art form. I
right.
love stand up comedy as in general, and but I'm not a stand up comedian, I would say. But
Okay,
I still love like doing it from time to time. So
right.
I'm not
And you
trying to be
mentioned.
Ali Wong. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, but you did mention that there's a writing aspect to it, so you kind of
Mm-hmm.
write jokes, and in this book you have some very good jokes. I remember the nut allergy banter between Colin and Lucy being like
Thank you.
hilarious, and
Thank you.
you insert that kind of levity in an otherwise in this novel with a lot of more serious and I guess thought provoking themes. So is that a challenge for you as a writer, just balancing that out, or that's like
Oh,
nothing to you? It's natural.
it's a really good question because in Last Tang Standing, I think like in my original draft, the one which got me Asian representation was just
Hmm.
a bit too much. Um, it's just like, wow, I can do this. I can write all these jokes. I'm funny on page, and it's a bit of a self promotion, but I can at least say that I'm funny on page. I think, and it was just
You
a
are.
bit too much. And I think in general, like to write a good book that actually sort of like ticks the right emotional boxes, like unless it's meant to be completely a comedic satire or something,
Yeah.
I think you need to sort of know when to rein it in. And so
Right.
that has been my process as a writer, like understanding, at least in terms of my novels, because when it comes to short stories, my short stories are very different in feel. And it was just something I needed to learn as an author because I am writing rom-coms in a way, and I had to sort of like learn to sort of rein that in a little bit and give like the more serious aspects of the emotional journey has to shine through as well, and not
Right.
just be like ha ha ha, it's funny, I got this great joke. Sometimes it just isn't appropriate, not at that
Right.
particular moment.
Right.
So
Oh,
yeah.
that's really fascinating. It's like as a writer, you are also the reading the room of your characters. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe now is not the time to,
Crack a joke.
yeah, to
Yeah.
crack a joke or to
Even though
laugh
you
at
have
something.
such a good joke, it's like, oh, and my humor it runs dark. So actually, with like Last Time
Love
Standing, I
that.
had to tone some of it down, because people
Oh,
like, I
really?
mean, my editor was saying like, it's maybe not appropriate for the genre. And again, rom com, a bit restrictive. I think the
Oh,
next book I write will be more messy. I think,
yeah, no, I would
but
love to
yeah,
see it's full dark comedy. That would be so
yeah,
fun.
right. Like
Yeah.
it's really hard. I'll tell you, as a woman, to
Oh,
write these
really?
kind of like write dark comedy and get away without someone saying, "Oh, but this is so inappropriate. It's not so problematic, etc.,
Oh my
etc."
God.
Like, I
Really?
mean,
Is
of
that
course,
something
like
you
professional reviewers don't do that. You see, like that's the interesting thing about actually my reviews. And I don't read my reviews anymore. But back in the day when I first started out, I was like surprised, like so like you would get really good critical reviews, but then you
yeah.
would have like readers who were like, I don't understand this, I don't get it at all. I mean, like, what is this person trying to do? And you just had to let that sit in because that's just the
Right.
way it is. You can't please everyone. You just can't. And I'm actually just really glad that like when professional critics and authors read it and they like it and they understand what I'm trying to do, versus someone who might be more who might just be a casual reader of the genre and is surprised with the kind of humor that they find in book, and like the kind of off the cuff cultural remarks that my characters make, and then be like, this person, oh my gosh, what are they trying to do there? It just is so problematic. It's hard. It's hard. It's a hard balance because I am publishing internationally. My
Right.
main publisher is the US publisher. I
Right.
My main market is the US market, and I have
Right.
to say that sometimes it's a bit disheartening to be tagged in these kind of reviews and people not getting what you're trying to do. But I've also moved past it, I think.
Right.
You can never completely move past it, but it's something that, like, if anyone here who's watching wants to be a writer and wants to publish internationally, you have to sort of keep in mind and sort of be prepared, because mentally it can be quite tough to be a writer slash published author in this day and age where, as I said before, feedback is so instantaneous and so comes from every corner of the internet, every corner. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of two sides of a coin. It's both great to hear like these bookstagrammers and book talkers like
Mm-hmm.
loving and raving your work,
Mm-hmm.
but then you are also in close proximity with people who have nothing nice to say, and that can be really
Mm-hmm.
difficult for authors.
Yeah.
And now we're talking.
Yeah.
Oh yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no. I mean, I'm just agreeing with you because you can't please everyone. And if your book is a book that pleases everyone, then I don't know. There must be
Yeah.
something wrong with it because it's just not possible.
Oh,
Someone will have something to say about it.
I love that. So
Yeah.
you heard it here from Lauren. Don't please everyone. So now that we're talking
Can't.
about the kind of larger world that you're, ooh, sorry, neighbors, a larger world that your books are kind of existing in, and they've gone out, they've been published. In recent years, Asian stories have become more visible in Western media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as an author, do you ever feel like you have to play a role or play into the diversity, because there's a difference between like uh, the Asian American voice and the
Mm-hmm.
Asian voice, right? So do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you have to play into that, since you mentioned that your publishers are based in the US?
It's hard for. I think it's more. I would approach it from like how my publishers must be trying to sell my books or pigeonhole my
Okay.
books in a way, because publishers have to do it. It's just the way it is. It's the reality of it.
Right.
They have to find a way to categorize your books. And it's interesting because obviously, as you mentioned, my books are set in Southeast Asia. The cast is Southeast Asian. It's
Right.
told through a Southeast Asian lens. But
Yeah.
my books are still classified as Asian American. I guess it's because they think that the Asian American audience would be interested in it. And it's absolutely
Right.
correct. It's not
Yeah.
to say that I'm Asian American or I'm trying to
Yeah.
pass off as Asian American, because everyone knows if they read my bios on all my social media handles, I very clearly state that I'm in Singapore and I'm
Right.
Malaysian born. So I think it's important for us to also sort of like give space to authors to kind of like explore different identities too, because like sometimes there's a whole like discussion about like who should write what, right?
Right.
And I think like the lines are getting very blurry. Like there's people who are firmly adamant that you should not be writing outside your lane. And I think
Yeah.
for certain racial things, it is absolutely true. But then
Right.
there are also Asian authors that are based in America who are not Asian American but have lived in America for some time, who are
Yeah.
also writing Asian American stories.
Right.
And it's a very fine line, right? Because if you really want to nitpick, you go like, oh, but this person is not really Asian American, didn't grow up. But then where do we draw the line? Are we going to police the authors and say that you should only write from this perspective? And I've
Yeah.
also gotten feedback from people saying, why are you selling your books in Singapore? But I'm based in Singapore, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, for me, I understand that it's like people are very concerned now of being right on page. They're very concerned about appearing to be, politically correct, policing
Right.
everything and policing every subject. But it's just not possible. And I think it's very bad for art. It's very bad for art. There are certain lines in the sand that we have to draw. I 100% agree. I
Yeah.
100% agree, especially when it comes to certain racialized issues in the context of America, especially because it's such a sensitive subject, right?
Right.
But I also think we need to be like more open-minded and say like where and not be too restrictive. I think The
Yeah.
question is like, where do we draw the line?
Right. That's and that's a really great kind of open-ended question. And you're right about maybe authors being placed into certain boxes, and that could be extremely limiting. And this
Mm-hmm.
kind of moral dilemma around books is it's certainly an interesting discussion. And at times it could
Mm-hmm.
be very generative, and at other times it's just too much vitriol. So I understand
Yes.
where you're coming from totally. All right, so
Oh, sorry.
now,
I
yeah,
just wanted to add one more thing. I didn't mean to
yes,
interrupt you, but
no, go ahead, go ahead.
just to answer your question, saying another part of your question where you said, do you have to play a role in representation and diversity? I think it's interesting because I am writing. I'm one of the handful of Southeast Asian authors writing contemporary adult fiction, and I do feel. I mean, published internationally in English. Let me caveat that as
Yes,
well. And
yes,
of
yes,
course, I feel the burden of representation. But I'm also one person. I'm talking about a very specific lived experience that I'm
right,
familiar with because that's the cultural or social economic milieu that I grew up in, and it's
yes,
a very specific cultural experience and lived experience that I bring to my
yeah,
characters.
yeah,
Um, and I can't represent everyone. I can't even represent everyone in Singapore, or every
right,
single race or every experience. It's just not possible. So
right,
it's hard. It's hard when when certain readers say like, oh, but you're not portraying this well because you're playing into a somewhat, your characters are playing into a certain stereotype of this particular type of um, I don't know, ethnic minority or something. Like there are some people who are not familiar and they would say that. And then I would say, but this is a character expressing a very specific viewpoint based on their lived experiences and they're of a certain generation. And it
right,
definitely is not meant to encompass everyone in that, from that specific ethnic minority or whatever. So it is
right,
tough because I do feel like there's a heavier burden of representation just
right,
because, but just by virtue of the fact that I'm Southeast Asian writing in a story set in Southeast Asia, because we have such a paucity of such stories that
yeah,
everything is scrutinized. So I do
right,
feel that, and I would urge readers to sort of just take a step back and say to yourselves, well, this is only one viewpoint. And it's great that it exists, and let's go with that. If there's
yeah,
anything problematic, ask yourself, is the author trying to perpetuate stereotypes, or are they examining a specific point of view that is relevant in the context of the story? Yeah.
right, yeah. And I think it's also maybe not, it's also harmful to think that a
Mm-hmm.
single Southeast Asian person can tell you about
Mm-hmm.
the Southeast Asian experience, because it's so
No,
vast and
it's
so
so
varied.
diverse.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we've been scattered all over the world, so there are just so many voices that and
Mm-hmm.
stories that can be told. And it's never, there are certain similarities, but it's never going to be the same one. So
Exactly.
thank you.
100%. Yes,
Yeah,
and it's social economic backgrounds play such a role as well. I mean,
yes, yes,
you just can't discount that. I mean, like the kind of
yeah,
education that you receive, what you've seen,
yes,
what you've
yes,
experienced would be totally, even within one segment of society would be completely different depending on, your lived experience. So I just urge
exactly.
everyone to just be forgiving and
Yeah,
understanding as well. If an author that you like or don't like from a very marginalized voice. I hate to use the word
oh
marginalized.
yeah, I know, I
Um,
know,
I'm not
it's
sure how I
weird.
feel about it, but I would
Me too.
say minority voice in the context of English publishing. I would urge you
Yes,
all to just say, take a breath and just think it's good that these stories are being examined. It's not the only viewpoint that should exist. So let's hope that by supporting these existing authors, that other authors from the region can come up with more diverse stories and tell stories from your viewpoint.
right, exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
thank you for mentioning that, because I feel like that needs to be said often. I think
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a sort of logic that needs to go mainstream. Like, one person can't represent their entire culture. So
No.
anyway, yeah. Moving on to more, I guess I wouldn't say uh, these are questions about you. They're not personal, but they're more about you. Um, it says in your bio that you're a reformed legal student, so you have a law background. Are you still practicing law?
Oh, we never really forget the training that we've been through. Uh, no, I haven't actually practiced law for I think 8 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
like it's been a while. I'm actually working full time in the humanitarian sector, so
Oh,
specifically
great.
kind of like development aid, but not really. Yeah, so I am
Cool.
actually not working in legal anymore. But
Right.
I think, like as I mentioned before, equipped, you never really forget the legal training that you have. So I guess I
Right.
still use it. Sometimes when there are contracts that I have to like enter into, on behalf of the organizations that I work for, I do just glance through with like a legal
Your
my legal
eyes are trained.
training and just go
Yeah.
like, okay, this is no, this is yeah. So
Okay, awesome. So as you said, like the kind of legal training never leaves. It doesn't. It maybe it's a part of your brain that you can't turn off. Does it
mm.
ever intersect with kind of novelist Lauren? And do you find these two,
Mm.
like lawyer Lauren or like novelist Lauren, kind of coming together? And what instances?
Complimentary. I think in Last Tang Standing there was this plot point that was centered entirely on a typo, and I was just really happy to put that in there because I felt that it was like so true to my experience, as a lawyer,
Yeah,
like a junior lawyer back then. I was like, I'm so glad I
yeah.
could talk about it. It's so funny, haha. But to me, I don't know, examining my past trauma as a lawyer. Yeah,
Trauma. The word
um,
is trauma, huh?
trauma. I put it in air
Trauma.
quotes, okay. But I mean, it's great because I was working in investment fund law, and it kind of
Oh, okay.
like intersected with other professional circles, and I think I have a lot of material for future books if I ever wanted to go John Grisham, or because
John
like
Grisham. Yeah,
if I ever want to do that, there's just
yeah.
so many things that I've seen that I'm like, oh wow, this is just not great. That if I ever wanted to write a legal thriller, I guess I could like find material and inspiration for my life. But yeah, I mean, I use my legal training in writing all the time, in the sense that like I'm more careful when I comb through a manuscript. I still
Right.
make mistakes, of course, because when you're writing 100,000 page novel, it's not. I mean, 100,000 word novel is not the same as like reading a document that's 8 pages long, or
Yeah.
even 100 pages long. So it's just not the same.
Right. Right. So yeah, as you mentioned, your brain, that part of your brain will never turn off, and that will complement you as a novelist. So any kind of aspiring writers who are currently watching, who are also maybe pursuing a law background, you have
And
Lauren
there are
to.
a lot of them.
Mhm.
There are a
Oh,
lot of former lawyers, or like day job lawyers, who are also novelists at this on the site. So many
yeah.
of them. I know so many of them. Yeah,
Oh, wow. Yeah, it could be like all of the things that you were exposed to in your job. You just can't help it. Like, let's turn that
exactly.
into fiction. All right. So I have a last question before we kind of go into the audience Q&A. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
in a previous interview that you were in the Philippines. You were here a few years ago and you went swimming with whales. So, is there, do you get inspiration from your travels for stories or books? And are we expecting something new from you anytime soon?
Oh yeah. So yes, I remember that anecdote. Yeah, I was in Moalboal. I hope I'm saying it
Oh,
right.
yeah,
I'm so sorry
Moalboal
if I'm
in
not.
Cebu. No,
Moalboal. Yeah,
yeah,
it was
good
so
job.
beautiful. I swam with blue whales.
Oh,
Not blue whales.
wow.
Sorry. You know the type that. Oh my
They've
gosh, I
got
actually
spots on
forgot.
their back. Are
Yeah,
they?
yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I
those.
forgot the term. Like I have
Don't
mom
worry.
brain.
Whale sharks, I believe. Yeah,
Whale sharks. Yes, that's
yeah.
exactly what I did. It was so amazing. Like the country is so beautiful. I was just like, oh, I'm so glad to be here. Anyway, without going into to that,
You should come
yes,
back.
travel definitely. I want to. Travel definitely inspires like my writing. I mean, I just wrote a recent short story that was commissioned by a UK weekly magazine, and it was based on like a trip I took in Italy, and I just like
Oh,
used
cool.
used it in the story. And yeah, it was I get inspired by travel all the time.
Cool.
I'm so glad
And
we're allowed to travel again.
I know, I know. Oh my goodness, like it feels so good to like be out of your city, you know? Are you working on anything new? Are we expecting another book
Oops.
soon? Oh,
Oh, I'm back. Sorry.
hi.
Yes.
It's okay. Did you catch my question?
No.
Oh, sorry. So, my
Sorry.
question was, are you working on anything new? Are we gonna
Oh, yes,
expect
I
a new
am.
book? Oh,
Okay, so
yes. Can you tell
so
us?
I'm very happy to say that I will have two young adult books coming out. The first, it will be in
Awesome.
2024,
Okay.
if not earlier. And the second book is will be hopefully in 2025. Oh my gosh, it's such a long time away. But yeah, so publishing works really slowly. So for anyone who wants to know how long it takes to turn over a manuscript, it takes about 18 months on average. So like from the moment a manuscript is acquired by a publisher, it takes 18 months to turn over a book and sometimes 2 years. I think for my YA, it will be 2 years because that's just the style for that publisher. So I'm
Wow.
really excited about it. It will be set in Malaysia, and
Oh, great.
it's about stand-up comedy, and it has such great jokes. I mean, like it's gonna be a really romantic coming of age novel. It will
Oh
be
my
so for
God.
like real romance fans, I guess this will be my most romantic novel. Yeah. So, but also
All
my
right.
funniest,
Well,
I
that just
think.
sounds like a
But
party.
like
That sounds like
kosher
a
funny,
party.
like okay funny.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
like
Oh, dark
okay funny
funny.
in the sense that like it's not going to be too dark for you because I am writing for a teen audience.
Right. So
So
that's so
yeah,
exciting. Sorry, but yeah,
thank you.
that's so exciting. That sounds like a party. Like my most romantic and probably my funniest novels are coming out in the next 2, 3 years. So watch out for that, everyone. All right. So that kind of ends the more formal interview part
Hmm.
of our conversation. We are going to go ahead and jump into audience questions. So if you're watching right now, please ask a question we'll we'll ask Lauren and she can answer it on the spot. So yes, let's just wait for the team to flash questions from the audience. All right, we already have one. Sorry, Lauren. Yes, you're there. Okay, great. So this is from Francis C. Hi, Lauren. Both of your books are published or were published during the pandemic. Do you think your writing process has been greatly affected by this still ongoing pandemic? So for us in the Philippines, lockdown still real. It's we're not
Mm,
as free
yeah.
as other countries. Everyone is still wearing masks. So there are other parts of the world where the pandemic is still very much alive and real. So
Mm.
yeah, how's your writing process changed because of
And
that?
I 100% feel for you, you
Mhm,
guys, because I think it's similar in Singapore to some extent. Because
mhm.
indoors we're still wearing masks. Outdoors, it's been we are allowed to remove masks in Singapore, and I think it's the same in Malaysia, as far as I can see right now. But it's
Yeah,
tricky because I'm currently in France, and like I've also been traveling back to some the places I used to live in, and nobody's wearing masks, indoor, outdoors, like no one. So for me, it's like a whole like culture shock. I mean, just talking about the pandemic. Okay, but I'm going to get back to your wonderful question. So, has my writing process been affected by the ongoing pandemic? I think it has because I think one of the great things about the pandemic, if I can say that, is that
mhm,
work from home is more of a culture. So there's been a
yeah,
significant workplace culture shift to accept
right,
working from home, right? And
right,
it's not only made things easier for me in terms of like planning my day and being there for my very young kids, but it's also made it easier for me to sort of like save the time that it takes to commute and all that to sort of like put
right,
it towards writing. So I try to
yeah,
write at least an hour a day or even 2 hours a day. So this has been very helpful. I think in that sense, the pandemic has been helpful for me as a writer to be able to faster and more because I do have other books, but they're not yet like sold yet. So I could only have written it because of the pandemic.
right. So the
Hmm.
time that it affords you is very valuable, especially as a writer. And as you mentioned, you are also a mom of two children. Is that correct? Two children.
Yes. So one is 1, the other is 4. So they're very young and
Oh
they're
my
very
God,
needy.
little tyke. Yeah, so I'm sure
Sure.
that the time that what the time that could have been in the office you spend at home with your children. So that's great. Thank you for the great
The commute.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the commute and possibly even going to the office. So thank you
Mm.
for the question, Francis. Do we have any more from the audience? Okay, one question from Ilea here. What advice would you give to other Southeast Asian writers who would want to
Hmm.
reach more readers across the world and still remain true to their storytelling or voice?
Wow, that's a fantastic question because I grapple with this all the time. I think like I always ask myself like what could like sometimes I ask myself like do I really want to go into down this route and be accused of being like problematic by some people when I talk about something that's so specific to this part of the world, right? I always ask myself these questions, but if I really am true to my intention to write authentically about the culture, then I just stay true to my intentions.
Right.
I think when you start to like water things down and sort of like try to please everyone, try to make things as palatable as possible for a global audience, you're going to lose what makes your voice unique and distinctive because you're trying to tell a story about a very specific experience. I mean, if it's not set in a fantasy sci-fi world, right? But even then, there's
Right.
still like your culture influence these so-called new worlds entirely, right? So I think it's really important, Aliyah, to sort of like try to retain the cultural specificities. Oh my God, sorry. I legit am a writer, okay? That make you unique and like don't be afraid to showcase it because if you don't, then you're just one of the many, many people who are trying to do things to please everyone else. And it's not going to be, you might get somewhere, but I don't know. I think you should be true to yourself. That's what I think.
Love that. That's a great
Don't
piece
be
of
afraid. Don't
advice.
be
Just
afraid to like be specific. Don't be afraid to like um, say things that might be considered like not cool to some people, some readers, because as I said before, you can never please everyone.
right. Love that. All right. So thank you, Ilea. That is a great question. And for any Southeast Asian writers out there who want to speak to a global audience, that's Lauren's advice. Just don't be afraid to be specific and be true to yourself. Are there any more questions from the audience? Now is the time to ask. All right. So we have from Elise, I hope I'm saying your name right. Elise Valentine. Honest
Mm-hmm.
question: with the rise of romance genre due to book talk and most of them tackling social political issues of women as well, do your books or do you as a writer are you usually compared with other books published in the West? So here we are again about,
Mm,
talking about
good question.
representation. Yeah.
I think I can never escape being compared or to other books that are in the same genre. I can never escape that because that's just the way it is. I mean, there's an apples and apples comparison for the just for the fact that you're published in this specific genre, right?
Right.
So I would say that like I am lucky in the sense because my writing voice is very distinctive. It is
Yes.
distinctive enough that like people come to me for a specific brand of writing and a specific style that they have come to sort of like expect from my novels, even though I only have two. But it is a style that you can expect even in my YA, as long as I'm writing in rom com or
Right.
contemporary adult fiction.
Right.
And if, as long as I'm writing like not literary, so-called literary novels, again, I don't like that genre distinction, but okay. Um, I think you can expect that. So, and this question is very broad. So I'll just say that like you can't escape being compared, of course. But I would say that for me at least, because my writing voice is very distinctive, that
Mhm.
I am still um, able to sort of like stand out from the crowd, if you wish. Also, by virtue of the fact that I'm writing about Southeast Asian people.
Right. Awesome. And so there you go. You will never, I think that's a piece of advice that we can take from you. You can't help being
Mm-hmm.
compared to other writers, especially in the same genre. But as long as you have
Mm-hmm.
confidence and you believe in your voice and the story that you have to tell, you'll be fine. All right. Any other questions from our audience? From Kimberly Christy Riz. What's the best moment you've had while writing your book? Oh, that's a cute question. Hello, Lauren, can you hear us?
So
Oh, there you go.
Kimberly, when I write, especially when I'm writing, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
good.
I can
I'm
hear
good. I
you.
can hear you. So for me, like my favorite part about writing, um, is exploring emotions, and like I sometimes I get really emotional when I write, so it's because I'm so invested, right, in the journey of the characters. So there's catharsis as well when I write certain scenes, like because I'm exploring maybe some things that I need to get out of my system. Um,
Right,
we as writers always bring a little bit of ourselves in the book, and maybe sometimes we're also exploring certain experiences that we are trying to like work through ourselves mentally through the act of writing, even trauma sometimes. um,
right.
I think like for me it's just really nice that when I'm writing a scene and it works, that I'm exploring all these emotions along with my character. And it's very hard to like explain. If you're not a writer, you won't necessarily get it. But also like from an aspect where I think anyone might understand is like, but when I write a joke that hits, right, like I know it works because I've
Right.
had that training. I know it works. And then when I read it to myself and I laugh, I just get such joy from it. It just makes me happy because I know that like if I'm laughing at my own jokes and I've seen it like 5 times, 50 times, when the process is done, when the book is, by the time the book is like finally done, I've read it like I don't know how many times. And if I still laugh, that makes me very happy because I'm like, yeah, that's something that I'm putting
Yep.
out there that is probably going to make people laugh. And that makes me feel
Yeah.
good. I like the idea that someone's going to read it and they're going to laugh because we all need laughter right now. There's so many things that's just so wrong, but I like to think that like someone reading my book would be like, haha, that's really funny.
Yeah, that I mean, I speak for myself and for all your fans and readers. I do pick up. I enjoyed Lucy Yi because I had fun reading it. It was really funny,
It
and
is
so
weird,
thank
right?
you.
Because there's so many serious. I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you again.
No, go ahead.
I thought you were done speaking. But if you think about it, there are some serious subjects that I explore. Maybe not all of them on page. Some of it is like in the mentions, off page, right? There are some
Right.
serious subjects that I explore, but it's still funny. And so that's what boggles some people's minds. So people who haven't actually gone through some of the traumatic experiences in the book are able to still take it as a rom-com and just go like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. Especially the pregnancy jokes, like even though
Yeah.
like some moms might be like, oh, flashback, PTSD of these things, but they still find it funny.
Yeah.
And of course, some of these subject matters are very, very heavy. We're talking about specifically an off-page mention of pregnancy loss. But I
Right.
feel like this is something we need to talk about even on page as a for like contemporary books, because why are women not talking about it? It affects so many women.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
talking about pregnancy loss specifically. I think the stats is like one in, I don't know, 1 in 5 or 1 in 4. I don't quote me on this, but do your own
Surprisingly
research.
high.
Never
Yeah.
exactly like have experienced that. And I just feel like, why are we not putting this on page? I wanted to put that on page. I wanted to talk about a pregnant protagonist. It's so
Right.
rare. So if there's anyone out there who's thinking like, what can I get a mom for her like push present or something, like this is actually
This is a
decent.
good.
But do note the content warnings. So if you know
Yeah.
someone or you suspect that someone has had some of the experiences that I'm talking about, just be more careful about that. But in general, like I think like you could give this book to a mom and they'll be like, yeah, I feel so seen.
All right. So if you heard that, everyone, if you caught that, this is a great gift for moms, new moms, moms to be, or my mom, who gave birth. The last time she gave birth was like 20 plus years ago. So I will probably hand this over to my own mom.
Great.
All right. So, any other questions from our audience? These are fantastic questions. Thank you, Kimberly. Any? Oh, okay. Sorry, I just got the signal that this is actually our last question. Thank you so much to everyone watching who left a comment and
Mm-hmm.
who asked these very sharp questions. And thank you, Lauren, for answering them. Our This is how we
Oh, thanks so
usually
much for
close
having
off.
me.
Of course, and this is how we usually close off our fully booked chats. We are going to do a round of fast talk or quick fire questions. So I'll answer the question and you respond. First thing that comes into your mind.
Okay.
All right. So you do stand up comedy. What was the most surprising thing about the last time that you did stand up?
Okay. The last time I did stand up, it was after like 2 years of not going on stage, or 3 years. So, um, I was just horrified by how bad I was on stage. I was just like, oh, oh, So
Oh
actually,
no!
like everything, I froze for the first time I did it, because it was part of like my mind went blank. And I think, like with anything in life, if you want to be good at it, you have to sort of like exercise the muscle. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was my most recent experience, which was like 2 months ago. I went on stage, and yeah.
All right. So very honest answer. Yeah, it was bad. But why let that stop you from doing something you really like? All right. Next question. What was the last
I was
book you
bad.
read that Next question is what was the last book you read that made you laugh very hard?
Breaking up. You're breaking up a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Did you
Oh,
catch my
okay.
last
Last
line?
book you've read that made you laugh so hard. Yes, yes, I see the question. What was the last book you read that made you laugh so hard? Um, you know, I remember a few funny books, but I don't remember a laugh out loud book, if that makes any sense. Um,
Right.
I read Neve Hargan's 12 Days in May, I think, and I thought that was
Hmm.
like funny. It's a
Okay.
rom com, and I really like it. I hope I'm saying her name right. It's Neve Hargan, and if sorry if I'm not saying it right, but in general, like I find like I really love. If you like rom com, I really love Lindsay Kelk. I think she's like perfect in terms of comedic timing and just writing like really good contemporary romances slash rom-com. And if you want an idea of like how to write funny without being too much, I think Lindsay Kell is very, very good. And there's another author I like called Vary McFarlane. I hope I'm saying her name right too. She's super funny. And these are sort of
Okay.
like the authors I go to if I want to have some kind of like, I know that their books are going to be funny. But with Vary, for example, her books
Yeah.
are also deal sometimes with very heavy themes. So that's something you need to
Right.
be aware of if you have some hesitations about heavy themes like death, loss, and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, these three
Okay.
authors.
So we have Neem Hargan, Barry
Mm-hmm.
McFarlane, and
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay. What is
Kelk,
her last name?
Kelk,
Lindsay Kelk.
Kelk.
So
Yeah, she's
Kelk.
hilarious. Yeah.
Thank you. I will look those people up right after we end our conversation.
Oh,
And
two more. Sorry.
yes, go ahead.
For
Yes,
nonfiction,
please.
I think Caitlin Moran, and I hope I'm saying her name right as well. Apologies if I'm not. She's hilarious. I think she's so funny on page. And
Okay.
who else? Caitlin Moran. Okay, so I think that's it. I think we can
All
close
right.
it on this
Cool. So,
question.
all right. So that's Caitlin Moran as your
Mm-hmm.
last kind of funny author that you go to.
Mm-hmm.
And our last question before we close off, what's your advice to aspiring comedy writers?
Hmm. Yeah, see, comedy is difficult because there is a subjective element, but there's also an objective element to what makes a joke work. Like
Right.
truly great comedic writers, um, they know how to play with words, and of course, like they're like play with words, and I guess if you're a stand-up comic, like how you say the line is very important as well. But comedic writers, like just for books, like novels, like myself, um, you really have to get a really excellent sense of timing, and it's hard to explain timing in terms of like in the written form, because we all read things differently. How a brain, if you're neurotypical, you're neuroatypical, you process words differently. So it's very
Right.
hard. You know, it's a different art form from stand-up comedy, because but there are certain things that still apply. It's called like having the rule of surprise. I mean,
Mhm.
anyone who's interested can go and sort of like read up on this. But I think you just need to understand and read more funny books, and sort of, and sooner or later, I guess you absorb it.
Yeah.
But I think like comedy writing is very, very difficult, and people underestimate how hard it is to do well, because a book that can, I mean, I've read a lot of books. I get a lot of like advanced copies as an author, to blurb or to write. I mean, to read just for like for fun. And
Yeah.
I know that a lot of times the book is described as laugh out loud or rom com, but they're not comedic at all. Or I mean, maybe I'm being harsh, but I don't think so. I think like sometimes it's just a contemporary
Yeah.
romance. It's not a rom com, and it's
Right.
okay. It's okay to not be a rom com.
Right.
Let's not dilute the term as well and say that everything is a rom com.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a contemporary romance. And so for me, what I'm trying to say is that um, comedic writing is so hard to do, and there's no one way to get better at it. You just gotta expose yourself to like different types of comedic writing, and also even like I guess stand-up comedy, and just try to understand and analyze why a joke hits. There's just no
Right.
other way to do it. There's no formula. I mean, there is, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Right.
It's hard to
Right.
explain it to you.
Right. So there you go. That's the advice for aspiring comedy writers. You just have to expose yourself to the comedy and
Mm-hmm.
maybe analyze these jokes, and don't
Mm-hmm.
underestimate how difficult it is to write funny
Right,
material.
it's really hard. Yeah,
Yeah. And I've heard similar things from writer friends like, "Oh, being funny is so hard."
it
It's
is hard.
not easy. It's a gift. So, and Lauren Ho has a gift for making all of us laugh. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Yes, you're hilarious. So thank you so much for joining us, Lauren, and thank you to everyone who is watching for spending time with us. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. But before we end today's event, Lauren, would you like to plug or promote anything? Sorry, hello. I think Lauren is not moving from my end. All right. So if it seems we have lost Lauren, so I'm not sure. Okay,
Oh,
she's
sorry.
breaking up.
Sorry, I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. Okay,
Okay,
let's do
hi,
it quick.
hi.
Quick. Like, what was the question?
Sorry, it's would you like to plug or promote anything before we end?
Hmm. Well, not really, but I mean, I do encourage everyone watching this show, if you feel compelled to sort of like, if you have never read my books, please do read, please do pick up a book with a fully booked, of course, my wonderful organizers of this wonderful chat. And also read Last Tang Standing, because I think they're very different books. And they are very uniquely Southeast Asian, but also they deal with very universal themes. So I mean,
Yes.
just read them if you want something that is very Southeast Asian centric, I would say.
Yes, I agree. That's a great way to kind of wrap up our call. So for everyone watching, you can get a copy of Lucy Yi is Not a Romantic through fullybookedonline.com. And this title will actually be on sale from July 15 to 17. So you have 3 days to get this at 15% off if you purchase this through our website. Again, thank you, everyone. Stay safe and keep on reading. Bye, Lauren. Bye, everyone.
Bye.